Now, we're moving on to another interesting conversation on drug abuse. I mean, drug abuse has become one of the most pressing challenges facing Nigeria today. So, we're going to be looking at the legal and social implications of drug abuse in the Nigerian society. Now, joining us this morning from Birnin Kebbi is Aminu A. Abdullahi. He's the Secretary, Young Lawyers Forum, Birnin Kebbi. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right. Now, first of all, what talking about drug abuse, and the legal and social dimensions to it. Tell us, what are the dimensions to this drug abuse in Nigeria currently?
Yes, now, in Nigeria, currently, the prevailing law that prohibits and punishes drug abuse and possession is the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency Act of 1989. It was enacted during the military regime, but it's still the prevailing law right now. And this particular law not only punishes drug use, but also possession and sale. You will find out that in most cases, drug users are charged with possession before the Federal High Court, which has the sole jurisdiction to try and sentence offenders of drug-related offenses. Yes.
Now, with the rise of substance, I mean, there are a lot of substances that are being used now, like codeine and tramadol and crystal meth. There are a lot of them. So, from your point of view, what do you think is fueling this trend, especially among young Nigerians, to, use these drugs?
Yes, I believe there are different factors that are responsible for this rising scourge, because I believe it's a scourge of drug abuse. The most prevailing one of it all is, I think, the lack of insecurity and economic meltdown in the country. You find out that a lot of youths go into the business of buying and selling drugs because there are no other alternatives. There is no better way of living, better way of earning a living. So you find out that they go into selling and buying of illicit drugs to make ends meet. That is not to say we are justifying it, but then that is the facts at hand right now. Also, looking at the lack of security, you find out that a lot of insurgents are in the business of buying illicit drugs. So naturally, when there is high demand of substances, it's only logical that supply will also increase. So people go into these things to make money, and all these bandits and kidnappers are, I think, currently the highest purchasers of illicit drugs in the country.
I understand when you say that most of them are in it to make money, but what about those that buy these substances to use? I mean, what could be the reason behind that as well, aside from most, selling it to people?
Well, looking at our local society, I can tell like there's a different factor to this situation. Like you find out that some youths perceive the use of drugs as being hip or being urban. They find it fashionable. It's unfortunate, but that is the situation at hand. Some youth, especially students in the university, find it fashionable to smoke Indian hemp, maybe take drugs like performance enhancement drugs like codeine and the rest of them. Whereas you look at laborers, people that work manual labor, use hard drugs in order to enhance their performance, you find out that a lot of farm workers, especially in rural areas, are in the habit of buying and taking tramadol so that they can work all day and sometimes even at night. So that is why you find out that especially in rural areas, the sale of tramadol is rampant.
All right. Now, Nigeria has, the NDLEA and other, laws that address the use of narcotics. So, in your assessment, how well do these laws, serve their purpose when it comes to curbing the use and the abuse of these substances?
Well, so far, I used to believe that the law has been effective, but I was reading through a report the other day. The United Nations Office on Drug Office and Crime gave a statistics that recently the Nigerian use almost 14.4% of Nigerians abuse illicit drugs. That is almost three times the international average. So I believe more needs to be done. We need to look at those laws. We need to make some amendments because the NDLA Act, as it is now, focus more on punishing drug users and sellers rather than reforming them. So we need to look at it more holistically. We need laws that reform drug users and drug sellers, not only punishes them. So in that aspect, I believe the National Assembly has some work to do. Us in the legal profession to take up the mantle when called upon, and I believe also civil society organizations will come up and do some sensitization, maybe during town hall meetings and the rest of them, so that this issue, this scourge can be curbed. Because just punishing offenders will not make drug users stop, but rather reforming them will go a long way in addressing this issue.
Yeah, you made a very good point, which I'd like you to talk more on, which is, the law focusing more on punishment rather than rehabilitation or helping these people out. Now, I'd like to know, why do you think they focus more on the punishment instead of, the rehabilitation? Aside from, what you mentioned that, there need to be laws to include, rehabilitation, but why do they focus more on that aspect instead?
Like I mentioned earlier, the act itself, it was a decree in 1989. So naturally, when there's an issue, the military always sees issues like we need to punish, we need to sanction, we need to place sanction. That's how they view things. But in the civilian governments, we look at things in a broad perspective. Just punishing, I believe punishing people for an offense without a provision for reforming them will not prevent them from going back. Because you look at the statistics, it's rising. And every day, every year, every month, people are being convicted for drug offenses. But you find out that the numbers of drug users and sellers are on the rise, not decreasing. So definitely something must be wrong. And I believe this reform, rehabilitation, is the correct way to curb these things. You look at our prison systems now, someone will be convicted of possession of, let's say, cannabis. Then by the time he gets to the prison, he will meet people, he will meet network of people that are convicted for far graver offenses, maybe selling of tramadol, sales of diazepam. He will make natural connections. By the time he gets out, he'll be looking forward to maybe utilizing that connection to make money or even use the drugs himself. So we need to reform them rather than punish them alone. And I'm not saying they should not be punished. Naturally, when you commit an offense, there must be punishment, there must be sanction. But then after the punishment, there must be provision for rehabilitation.
So, in your opinion, that is a way for them to for a balance to be between punishment and rehabilitation. So, after the punishment comes the rehabilitation, if I understand you correctly.
And there are some instances where you find out that the offenders, let's say a young boy of 12, 13 was caught maybe with a small quantity of cannabis sativa. I believe the proper thing to do is to rehabilitate that boy because before he becomes an addict, that is when action must be taken. Recently, I know there are rehabilitation centers in NDLEA commands in different states in Nigeria, but then the issue is that they lack the proper infrastructures and also the professionals. They need psychiatrists and psychologists, but they lack all those necessary infrastructures and personnel to deal with this issue. I believe the government needs to focus more on rehabilitation than on punishment alone.
All right. Now, we also see that young people, particularly, are arrested for possession of small quantities of these drugs for their personal use. And we find that most of them end up in these prisons, these overcrowded prisons. They're also being punished for using these small quantities. So, do you think that should the law treat personal use differently from trafficking? How should these things be handled depending on what the offender is being caught doing?
Yes, indeed. The provisions of the NDLA Act itself have specific guidelines, like drug use is categorized under possession. So when a person say is convicted for possession, the punishment I think is 15 years, not less than 15 years. Whereas when a suspect or a defendant is convicted for dealing, that is the buying and selling, the sentence is life imprisonment. So there is disparity between the sentences. Dealing carries weighter sentences than drug use, that is possession. But then again, you find out that that particular section deals with possession does not specify the quantity that is triable or is punishable. So normally the NDLE has a guideline. Maybe like recently, I know anything less than 100 grams of cannabis sativa is to be handled in-house and they are not to be charged to court. But then these things need to be incorporated into the NDLA Act itself to give it more legal backing. Because a guideline or principle in the NDLA office has no legal backing and it may not be followed at the whims of the director general or the commandant himself.
Now, there have also been issues and, of people who, when they are being caught or arrested with either for possession of these drugs or for trafficking and selling to other people, it takes a while for their trial to take place before their final judgment is being placed. And you find that sometimes these people spend so much time in detention while waiting for their trials. Why is that, and what can be done about it?
Well, as in most facilities in Nigeria and most agencies in Nigeria, the NDLA itself has its lapses. During investigation, the most prevailing issue we're dealing with is pre-trial detention by the NDLA officers. You find out most of the times the suspects are kept for a long period of time, maybe more than a week or so before they are charged to court. And the courts we have, they are already overcrowded with a lot of cases. So, the judge himself have to go through series of different cases, maybe a lot of cases before he gets that particular NDLA case. And of course, trial has different stages. The NDLA has to present their witnesses. Their witnesses will be examined, and the defense counsel, if the suspect or defendant has a lawyer, will have to go through the motion of cross-examination, asking those witnesses questions. And then also the defendant will be given the opportunity to defend himself, maybe call witness in his defense. So all these things take time, and you find out that maybe the docket is already full. So you find out that a single case will take like 3, 4 to up to a year before it is completed. So the correct thing to do now, we need more judges, honestly, more facilities in the courtrooms themselves. NDLA officers are doing well so far, but they need to do better too, because the trial detention already is an infringement on the fundamental rights of those suspects. So more needs to be done. And I believe more facilities will fast track cases. And also, if the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court too will give due consideration on fast tracking NDLA cases, maybe giving them special attention, being fast tracked, I believe it will help in forwarding on all these delayed cases of NDLA.
Right. And, does the law also have anything to say about, because we find that sometimes, most of these officials of the NDLEA or other, related bodies in charge of these things, when they meet young people on the road, they start to search their bags, or I don't know if they have prior information concerning those people, but there have been issues where bags are being searched, people's items are being manhandled in the quest to find something on them. So does the law have anything to say about that, protecting the citizens from such acts of searching, on unwarranted searching of their belongings and personal effects?
The law has provided provisions regarding illegal searches. The proper procedure to take is when you are a victim of illegal search and seizure by any agency, not just the NDLEA, is to file an action in court. But then you find out that most of the times NDLEA have informants that inform them of maybe a transport of or a shipment of drugs in a particular vehicle before they start searching. So I believe the due process to be followed is when you are a victim of illegal search by the MDLE is to approach courts. But then that's where you face the issue of convenience. Maybe your bag is searched and you are delayed for 30 minutes. Most people will not feel the need to go to courts and file action for illegal search and the rest of it because they believe it will be a waste of time. But then more needs to be done, and I believe the NDLA officers too need to be reoriented on how to treat a potential suspect and how to follow the law when they are searching.
All right. Now let's look at the issue of addiction, because this is also one of the things that come out from drug use, particularly among the young people. Now, addiction globally, it's been recognized as a health condition, but in Nigeria, addicts, are often treated like criminals, right? So, from a legal standpoint, what do you think that this undermines their rights, or their fundamental human rights, or something like that? What do you think about that?
From a legal standpoint, the both addicts and whoever, everybody in Nigeria have rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. Being an addict will not deprive someone of his fundamental rights. But then we have this issue of stigmatization of addicts in our society. There is currently no law that says people must treat addicts as normal human beings. But then this is a social issue, not a legal issue. There is no provision that says the society has to view addicts in a particular way. It's a social issue, but then more needs to be done again. There must be reorientation and there must be sensitization of this issue. Because most of the times, addicts that want to abandon the habit of drug abuse find out that they are already rejected by the society. So, what is the need for them to try to integrate themselves in the society? The society now has a role to play. Addicts should not be shunned, they should not be abandoned, they should be, as a matter of fact, embraced. They need more guidance, they need more love than stigmatization. That is the issue we are facing now. But as it is now, there is no uh, legal authority or any legal backing that forces the society to view addicts in a particular way.
All right. Now, some countries, are experimenting with this idea of legalization or decriminalization of certain drugs. Do you think that this could ever be, do you think this can be an option here in Nigeria, from a legal point of view, looking at our society and, what our law says? Do you think that, we can also adopt that idea of legalizing the free use of certain drugs without, batting an eyelid on it?
I don't believe that is possible in Nigeria, although anything can happen. But I believe even in the countries you are talking about, like the United States of America, it's not every state that legalize the use of, let's say, marijuana. Certain states like California and some southern states. But in Nigeria, we have a different culture than those countries. And our culture not only frowns upon the use of illegal drugs and illicit drugs, but also places sanctions on them. And our laws are a reflection of the cultural realities we have. So I don't believe Nigeria will ever legalize the use of illicit drugs like cannabis. Of course, the use of cannabis is rampant, and I know there was a time the late governor of is it Ondo States, Akeredolu SAN, made an attempt to legalize the use of marijuana, if I'm correct, but I did not see the light of day. So it is not possible. Our laws are a reflection of our culture, and our culture not only frowns upon the use of illicit drugs, but criminalizes it. So it's not possible to legalize them in Nigeria. That's my take on this.
All right. And now, looking at the drug control policies that have been put in place in the past by the government, from your observation, what gaps still exist when it comes to policy implementation as regards to, drug abuse and curbing the use or reducing the use of certain drugs?
From in my own view, there is this lack of crucial infrastructures that's especially in the NDLA. You find out that in NDLA commands in states, there are no vehicles for operation. Their staff are underpaid. Maybe some of them don't even receive allowances, only salaries. So the government needs to come up here and do the needful, because a security official is being asked to do a job, he needs to be comfortable. He needs to have all the facilities he needs. There needs to be mobility. There needs to be appropriate remuneration in terms of allowances and the rest. Because most of their officers go on night rates. Most of them go on stakes, maybe spend overnight in remote areas trying to track down drug traffickers. So the government needs to do more in giving them allowances, vehicle, and proper infrastructure in their commands. On the part of the suspects too, the government needs to do more in ensuring that their fundamental rights are reserved while in detention. Because you go to NDLA commands, you find out that suspects don't even have places to stay. Maybe they sleep on the floor, they don't have beds, they are not fed unless they have relatives that come to visit them and do them food. They are not fed. And that's the reality. So the government needs to do more in these aspects. Recently, there has been a pronouncement by the Supreme Court also that suspects, while being interviewed, are entitled to have a legal representation or member of a civil society organization or their relatives or any other person of their choice when they are being interviewed or interrogated by the officers of the NDA or police or any other law enforcement agencies. I believe this is in regards to section 15 and 17 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. So you find out that most of the commands of the NDLEA lack the facilities like cameras and the rest of them, and even investigation room. So the government needs to do more in providing these facilities to ensure smooth investigation. Yes.
Right. So now the NDLEA, I mean, they are tasked with handling issues concerning drug and drug abuse. But so far, I mean, the rate of the use of these drugs seem to keep on increasing and increasing and increasing as the years go by. And I would like to know, what is your assessment of NDLEA when it comes to addressing the supply and demand side of drug abuse, seeing that it's still on the rise and it's continuous?
Previously, I used to hold the view that the NDLEA have been so far effective. But as of now, I've changed my view, honestly. The NDLEA needs to do more, because there are instances where, they will go to arrest a drug trafficker. By the time they get there, he has already been informed that they are coming. So you find out that in most cases, there are people that are complicit, official people complicit in this drug trade. People giving them information, giving them information on what's not. You find out that some people in high places are also beneficiaries of this drug trade. So more needs to be done. There needs to be a holistic approach on how these things are being tackled. Because most of the times what we have is that low-level dealers are the ones being arrested and charged to court. While the drug kingpins are there, they are known, but nobody will approach them or even arrest them. So there needs to be something done tackle this issue. More needs to be done, because as it is now, things are escalating to a magnitude that is going to get very dangerous in the society very soon.
You're very correct. I mean, like you said, something needs to be done, because I mean, the rate at which it is increasing is quite alarming. But thank you so much for your time and for having this conversation with us, Aminu A. Abdullahi, Secretary, Young Lawyers Forum, Birnin Kebbi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Exactly.
Signatur TV, news in your pocket.